This is Movies on TV Podcast Industries. We're here with our spoiler-filled discussion of Wonder Woman 1984.
I've seen this contest. Humble even the most seasoned warriors, Diana.
I can do it.
Just do your best. And remember, greatness is not what you think.
Welcome back, movie fans. We're here on TV Podcast Industries for our movie review of Wonder Woman 1984. I think last time we kind of called it Wonder Woman 2017, the first movie, and now it's really confusing. This one wasn't made in 1984, obviously. This is the most recent movie starring Wonder Woman. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow moviegoers, or should I say HBO Max watchers?
Probably.
I am one of your other hosts, John,
yes,
from 1977.
And I'm from 1976. Yes, very good, John. That's the only confusion there. It's probably just our fault for calling last time's Wonder Woman 2017. Unfortunately, Chris has taken ill and is unable to join us for our discussion about Wonder Woman. He unfortunately couldn't even get to the cinema to watch it. He's a bit ill. Not the big C word, fortunately. It's just a little winter cold, but unfortunately that would absolutely ruin his voice for the podcast. So get well soon, Chris.
Yes, and let's just clarify, that means COVID.
Yeah, I just don't like saying that word. It's almost as bad as saying the other word, which we can't say in this podcast, John.
Exactly.
We are going to discuss Wonder Woman in full spoiler-filled detail. We know this movie is coming out in the US on the 25th of December. We were lucky enough, thanks to Warner Brothers Ireland, to get to see the movie early. We got to see it on the 14th of December, just before it got its full release in the UK and Ireland in cinemas on the 16th of December. So Thursday the 16th it came out. So hopefully you've watched the movie. If you haven't watched the movie, what do you want to say overall, John? Should people buy their tickets to go to the cinema? Should they sit at home and watch it on HBO Max? What do you think? Should they not watch it at all? That's the other option, sorry.
I think people should definitely watch it, for sure. I think, obviously in North America, you can get HBO Max. You can't here in Europe. So, that's a good choice to have given the current COVID situation. And, people being a little nervous to go into sort of public settings and certainly into maybe a cinema theatre setting. I think we were very lucky. The cinema setting that we had was just for press. Yeah. And so, it was socially distanced, as would a normal theatrical release as well. I mean, certainly over here in Europe and specifically in Ireland, the cinemas are open and they have to adhere to socially distanced rules. So, I mean, I know we went to see Tenet during the summer and that was very well done. And you can wear your mask and apply as much hand sanitizer. So I think if you feel comfortable going out and going to a movie theatre, then by all means go and do that for sure, because the sound, again, a bit like with Tenet, I was slightly overwhelmed by the sound of this right at the start, because of watching most of my movies and TV series at the moment on our TV. Yeah. And so it is a different experience. I'd never really kind of noticed that until Tenet, and now again it hit again with Wonder Woman 1984. So yeah, if you feel comfortable going to the theatre, go. If not, then if you're in North America or if you have access to HBO Max, then use that channel to look at it. But certainly, I think, it will be restrictive for people in Europe where HBO Max isn't, to be honest.
And sadly, a lot of countries going back into lockdown again just as this movie came out. Yeah. So I've seen a lot of people on Twitter saying they bought their tickets and couldn't go to the cinema, unfortunately, because it's outside of the zones they're allowed to travel in. But yeah, I echo John. This is a great film. This is the kind of film I definitely needed right now. Really uplifting movie. Don't want to spoil anything about it within this section, but if you haven't seen it yet, pop off to the cinema, go on to HBO Max if you can, and watch it, and then come back, and we'll be here for a spoiler-filled discussion. And just a heads up, if you're just joining us for our Wonder Woman podcast, we do podcast DC at the moment on a weekly basis. We're covering Pennyworth, which is currently airing on Epix in the US. It's about 3 episodes in at the moment. Really enjoying going back to the Pennyworth story. This is the kind of prequel to Gotham almost. It's the story of Alfred Pennyworth in the UK in the 60s. Really fun story. But if you are watching that, come join us on tvpodcastindustries.com for our weekly coverage of Pennyworth, another DC show. And we have lots and lots more shows coming up as we go into 2021. Let's get into our discussion about Wonder Woman 1984, starring Gal Gadot. I think she deserves that title right alongside Wonder Woman. I think without Gal Gadot, we wouldn't have these Wonder Woman films, really. Also, without Patty Jenkins, we wouldn't have these Wonder Woman films. Once again, returning to direct this movie. Recently announced, I'm sure we saw this, John, recently announced that Patty Jenkins is going to be directing a Star Wars movie. She's going to be directing Rogue Squadron.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly now explains one of the big kind of gooey scenes, shall we say, in this movie, involving a plane.
Yes.
Because, it was really interesting to hear that her father had been a fighter pilot or in the American Air Force, and she has this fascination with planes and that whole thing. So it certainly explains one of the more sentimental and gooey moments of this movie for sure. And so I'm really excited to see what she brings to Rogue Squadron, actually, now that she's been flagged for directing that with Star Wars.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Going to an X-Wing movie when she's looking for a movie about pilots. That's kind of cool. It'd be interesting to see what her take is. I think we have to wait till 2023 for that one.
Yeah, it's a long way off.
It's a long way off, but really cool to see that she's picking up the Star Wars mantle for her next big movie, I suppose. The screenplay for this movie was actually written by Patty Jenkins, Geoff Johns, and Dave Callaham. Geoff Johns, you may know, is the DC Chief Creative Officer, kind of like the Kevin Feige of DC. He's responsible for all the comic book output and also the movies, so but is involved in the screenplay here as well. Patty Jenkins, obviously the director, involved in the writing, and Dave Callaham as the other writer for this movie. Probably most well known as being the writer for the Expendables movies.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
That's a nice shift tonally, I think.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Or should I say one giant leap for cinema kind in tone? Interesting.
Yeah, but it's still, I think the Expendables could easily have been a comic book movie. You could kind of see how it could be a comic book.
Yeah, definitely.
Interestingly, we will see him again next year. Has moved over to Marvel as well, working in Marvel. He is the writer for the movie Shang-Chi and the 12 Rings coming out next year.
Stuff.
I am so excited for Shang-Chi. It's a comic book I read when I was a kid. I read a lot of them, reading the most recent run of Shang-Chi as well. So, really intrigued what they do with this movie on cinema. It's a finished production, will be out hopefully in 2021. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Dave Callaham brings to it. The story for the movie was done together with Geoff Johns and Patty Jenkins did the full story. And once again, Wonder Woman based on William Moulton Marston and H.G. Peters' comic book creation. John, do you want to tell us the synopsis for Wonder Woman 1984?
Sure. Greatness is not what you think. In 1984, Diana Prince is living and working in Washington, D.C. When she isn't protecting the city as Wonder Woman, she spends her time alone. Since losing her first love, Steve Trevor, in World War I, Diana has distanced herself from human contact. When her new co-worker, Barbara Minerva, is asked to identify some ancient artifacts, Diana takes an interest in a seemingly mundane item and forms a bond with Barbara. The item was created by a mischievous god. It grants whoever holds it one wish, but it takes a toll. Diana inadvertently wishes Steve Trevor back into existence, while Barbara, who is often overlooked, wishes to be just like Diana. Meanwhile, businessman and TV personality Max Lord has been trying to track down the item for years, believing it's the answer to all of his problems. Lord retrieves the item and uses it to get his failing business back on track. But being an overnight success isn't enough for Max. He wants more. He begins to grant everyone wishes, no matter what they are, in exchange for more power, influence, and health. Diana learns that her failing powers are caused by the return of Steve, and realizes in order to save everyone they must reject their wishes. She has to sacrifice a life with Steve and convince the world that achieving their version of greatness is not worth the pain it causes to everyone else in order to save it.
Excellent. Thanks for that, John. I think we
No
mentioned
worries.
on the Wonder Woman podcast that the original movie, that there was quite a straightforward storyline going on the screen, which allowed it to kind of breathe and allowed us to kind of learn the characters and get to know the characters really well. I think the story in here, really from the opening scene, the opening like 2 or 3 minutes, mentioned this line of greatness is not what you think. It comes up right at the beginning of the movie. And I think it's, once that line is said, the rest of the movie is explaining to Diana really that her perception of where she wants to be as a person and where she wants to be in the universe may take a lot more work and may not be exactly what she expects she needs to attain, or it may not fulfill her in the way that she thinks it will fulfill her. And I think that I like that about this movie, that it's a reasonably straightforward concept from the beginning to end.
I think so. And it's also about how you achieve greatness. Mm-hmm. And you know, that tale, that story, that lesson is right at the beginning, mm-hmm. In the big competition on Themyscira, but it is also ultimately what Max Lord has to also understand, as well as Diana, that it's not just what version of greatness that you have, it's how you obtain that as well. Yeah. So I mean, it's a really I think quite neat and neatly packaged storyline, mm-hmm. and thrust of the main point of the script, but it is also, I think, wrapped up nicely in using and looking back to 1980s movies Absolutely. As well. So actually the storytelling in and of itself is really simple. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of signposts here from movies from the 1980s, and that in itself gives a very different type of feel to the film as well, from the direction of Patty Jenkins in taking that sort of cue from those movies. Yeah. In terms of how she establishes the shot, how she does, the framing. Also, I think in the use of CGI, I think it's kind of nicely pared back, actually, even though they do use it, absolutely, but it is pared back. I think it's really when you see Cheetah, you can see it's very CGI. Yeah,
it's something that couldn't have been done in the 80s, definitely. I think when I came out of the cinema, the first impression that I had was this movie could have been made in the 80s, and that's not at all a criticism of it. I don't think movies have to constantly look like they were made last week to be fresh. You know, I'm an older guy. I'm from the 70s, watched movies all the way from the 70s all the way through to now. And there's something about the aesthetic of films from different periods that sometimes gets lost. So when someone tries to make a movie set in the 80s, you can tell they're looking back and they're picking and choosing what they think will look best. They're almost making fun of the time period in a way. This just feels like they're looking at the 80s and going, right, if we did this movie back then, how would we do it and how would we tell the story? And you're right, it really does play into the themes of the film. It's really conscious of what was going on at the time in America, particularly this kind of attitude of greed that was going on. There was a lot of big players in Wall Street, for example. Everybody had this concept, and it comes out with Max Lord in the way that he says everybody has this concept of, if you just believe in yourself, no matter what it is, you can attain it, and that's not necessarily the way you should go about your life, is what the lesson we're being taught within Wonder Woman is. It's the concept of, maybe it's not the thing that you're looking for that's the most important thing for you. Look and find what's most important to you, and maybe that will lead to your own version of greatness.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, weirdly, for a movie that was supposed to come out, much earlier this year, it is now coming out at Christmas, where, there are suggestions of rampant consumerism, and it's more about, I think, this idea of I want, and that fits nicely into the 80s, where you have this loosening up of structures and different things, from Reaganism in the US, Thatcherism in the UK, and that whole change. So where you can have anything you want. And that is ultimately what Max Lord is offering here through this artifact to everyone, but to, achieve greatness in his mind's eye. But it means everyone is just, no matter what the consequences are saying, I want, exactly. I want, or in this case, I wish. It is kind of a retelling a bit of, the genie in the lamp
basically
kind of element,
That's
really.
Absolutely what it is, yeah. It's less standing on the shoulders of giants than standing on the backs of your contemporaries, basically. It's like stepping over everybody else to get what you want without looking at the consequences for everybody else. So I thought it was a very inspirational idea for the film. I thought, once again, it seems like they've got...
It feels right for Wonder Woman.
Exactly.
That's
they feel like they've nailed Diana Prince really well. I wrote up a quick spoiler-free kind of preview for this over on our website and TV Podcast Industries, and I didn't want to spoil anything. That's the kind of person I am. If you haven't seen the film, I'm not going to tell you about it. Go watch the film. I'm going to tell you whether I liked it or not, and that's kind of it. So that's why you're here listening to us talk in a spoilery way. But over on our website, I just quickly kind of wrote up an idea of what I thought, whether I liked it or not kind of thing. And the one thing that came to mind watching this movie was when we saw Diana Prince for the first time, Wonder Woman for the first time. She appeared in Batman v Superman, a movie with those two massive heroes. You've had multiple movies about the multiple comic book series and TV shows, everything all about them. So we knew the two of them. That's what sold you the ticket to go and see them in the cinema. And then Wonder Woman walks in, this fully formed character, excellent theme tune as she walks in, and you go, who's this person? I want to see her movie. And they did such a good job. Zack Snyder did such a good job with his introduction of that character that instantly you wanted to see where she was, how she got to this place, how could she stand toe to toe with the billionaire superhero that is Batman, this really intelligent strategy master, basically, and toe-to-toe with a super being from another planet. You wanted to know her history. And I think what Patty Jenkins has kind of been able to do with these two movies is really fill in how Diana Prince became the person that we see in those movies. Particularly in Batman v Superman. Justice League is a bit different because there was so many characters in there that she just kind of stood alone anyway as a great character.
She actually almost reminds me of Spider-Man in terms of the great power comes great responsibility, in that she is hugely powerful as she's a god.
Okay. Yeah.
But there is that moral center to her that is very different from, I think, the feeling of being goody two shoes of Superman or effectively with Batman, where it's just being corroded by the death of his parents, but also just the constant having to deal with the Joker.
Well, yeah.
It's not that Batman doesn't do good, but his methods are very different from what Diana Prince employs. And I think Diana Prince understands humanity better than Superman, to the point where her moral center is much more in tune with humanity, with the people of the world than Superman, because of that godlikeness.
I think that's what we're learning in this film, that this is what she's developed, because the first kind of bit, and we talked about this on our previous podcast about Wonder Woman. We started with Wonder Woman, the character, as she kind of goes throughout the movie. We're starting the same way here, really. What she's learning in this movie, she spent 70 years apart from humans, 65 years roughly apart from humans after Steve Trevor died. She's kind of separated herself. She's stood alone. You see all those photographs of herself, buying her ranch and naming it Trevor Ranch, I think. She's had this experience where, while she is saving people as Wonder Woman and being the superhero for those 60 years, or at least for the last couple of years anyway, we hear some kind of reference to the fact that there's been a woman saving people in the DC area. But she stayed apart from making friendships, from making any kind of bonds with anybody else, since she had this loss of Steve Trevor and probably all the rest of the members of the team. She's outlived way longer than any of the other people that she would have interacted with in the past. So, and she's been separate from everybody. In this movie, we're seeing that she's starting to connect with people towards the end of it. And by the time we get to Batman v Superman, as you say, she has that moral core where she does know humans really well. With Superman, it does seem like he became fully powered. He had these massive amounts of abilities, And he is automatically separated from the human race because he's a godlike character. He has a godlike power, effectively, whereas she's learning and making her connections with humans back here in 84. So I think that's the kind of connection between the two lines. Overall, what did you think of the Wonder Woman? We're not going to go into the story as much here. What did you think of Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman in here?
I think she nails it. You know, I really like her portrayal of Diana Prince. Mm-hmm. I liked her sacrifice that I think Gal Gadot really portrays that well, you know, from the fish out of water, but in a really melancholy, lonely way. You know, this idea of then connecting in with Barbara Minerva. I mean, initially she's, you know, Diana Prince feels like she's, you know, she is literally towering above Barbara Minerva, but also that she is distant. And I like how she gradually, you know, they have that meal together where they're talking about, you know, boyfriends and their lives and all that. And that's when you really get the feeling, and it really hits home, that actually she is still pining for Steve Trevor. Yeah. She hasn't moved on from that, or she maybe she has to some extent, but she's certainly not allowed herself to do anything that would cause her to be more sociable. I mean, she's actually almost sounds antisocial. She's also an archaeologist, so she's down in the basements. You know, look at that. It is that she's cut off from the present because she's thinking about the past in Steve Trevor and that loss. Her job is in the past about the gods and all these artifacts, and it's like she hasn't connected. And here with Barbara, then you do, and I like how she progresses through that, and then with the realization of why she's getting weaker as Wonder Woman, then because of having wished Steve Trevor back into existence, then it's taking that the price she has to pay for that wish being granted is her power. Yeah. And so, you know, I like that unfolding and her realizing, and then what she has to do. I mean, I really found the end of this absolutely great. Really epic. And I thought she was fantastic with the whole ending, from, the whole fight sequence with Cheetah, from everything where, both in the White House and at the research facility, was really, really good. I mean, ultimately, you know, I think just to put the context on it, they're having to deal with this artifact that grants power, or the wish to people, but in return, there is a price paid for that wish, and you lose something. And in Diana's case, it's her powers, it's her strength. Yeah. And ultimately, this artifact becomes personified quite literally in Max Lord, whose wish is, I want to become you. I want to become the artifact. So he is the one that grants the wishes. Yeah. And receives ultimately what is being lost by the other party. He receives that cost to him. Exactly. Yeah. I like this premise. I like the kind of concept of it. You know, there's a part of that conversation that you mentioned with Diana and Barbara going for dinner, where they're having that conversation, and Barbara kind of reveals that she has an opinion of Diana, and has it from the moment that she meets her, that Diana is someone that goes out and parties all the time. She has that look about her. She's always very well turned out. She's very intelligent, and Barbara is so attracted to her life because Barbara's a downtrodden person. And then her wish is to become Diana. Over the course of the film, we see that she doesn't get what she wants out of that wish. She gets all the bad side as well. She gets those moments where every single person that's walking past her feels like they can chat her up, feels like they can get something out of her, as she starts to develop this kind of confidence that Diana has, as she starts to develop her look and her style, and she realizes that this life that she wanted from
Diana, effectively, the similar life to Diana, isn't all that it's cracked up to be. It's again, part of that thing of greatness not being what you expect is the grass is always greener on the other side. You think you can get something else easily in this case, all you have to do is wish for it and you get it, and it actually turns out to be completely different.
Barbara makes the point to Max Lord that I want to be my own brilliant person and have my own strengths. I want to be that apex predator. And so you have this very you have this really nice build-up as Diana and Steve realize that Max Lord has gotten the artifact. They're trying to track him down. They see all the weirdness happening in the world with society because people are just getting what they want and haven't thought of the consequences, the wider consequences that might happen, or the consequences that happen to themselves. And of course, at that moment, Diana and Steve are also working with Barbara. Yeah. And so it clicks to her that the reason why she is becoming, more confident is because she's made that wish where she wants to be like Diana. Mm-hmm. And so it ends up with her protecting Max Lord because she doesn't want to lose that. But she has this moment where they are playing out Max's final sort of plan to touch everyone in the world and get all their wishes, through the satellite, the US satellite system. That she also wants to be herself, and that would be her actual wish. That she would want to have her own power, her own abilities, and be, I suppose, sovereign in herself, that it's not just that she's borrowing what Diana has. She has her own powers, and that's why ultimately she ends up with the cheetah persona, because she talks about that being one of her favorite animals, and on the plane to this satellite base, it's all about being the apex predator.
Yeah. Have to say, Kristen Wiig is fantastic in this role. I've loved her in some other movies before. Really, really like to hear, but I love how you see the different sides of Kristen Wiig. She's such a good chameleon and comedian. She's a very funny person in a lot of roles that she's been in the past, but seeing her as this kind of downtrodden character to begin with, and also going through that kind of 80s transformation. We used to see this in 80s movies all the time, where it's like tie up the hair, take off the glasses, and they're amazingly gorgeous, or pull down the hair and take off the glasses, and aren't they gorgeous? She plays that role really well, but there's a lot of depth in there as well. And I must say, I really like that they kept the cheetah side of things, the actual character for the comic books, this CGI creation. I love that they kept that to just a very small portion of the movie at the end, because it allows you to kind of explore Barbara Minerva as a character, and someone that looks at Diana as being the perfect person to be. And I love that we have her going through that full transformation, getting to almost the same level as Diana effectively, and then realizing I want to surpass this. I want to go further. I didn't reach my dreams by getting here. I can do it by going a different way. I can get more. I love that we had a big arc for the antagonist here, in Barbara Minerva.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Kristen Wiig here is really, really good. And I love the slow descent that she has, or maybe it's an ascent, in gaining Diana's powers. There's some really lovely moments through this where she's gotten some of her powers. There's a really nice moment where, she's previously talked to Diana saying how she can't really wear stilettos, she's hopeless in them, and walking, and she puts some on and does a jump to miss some water and jumps down, but she doesn't even notice it herself. I like the fact that even though her goal is to be more noticed, she's not self-aware to the changes happening. And there's a moment where she's trying on a new dress thinking, oh no, this isn't really going to work, and the shop assistant is saying, you look amazing. Like the whole 80s thing. It hugs her figure, the hair's up, the jewelry's on. It's real 80s, but I like that she's really oblivious to these creeping power gains that she's getting until she's at the party at the museum at the Smithsonian being hosted by Max Lord, in order so he can grab this artifact, from the, from her office and ultimately consume it for himself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. That's a really interesting kind of twist in it, that she is gaining exactly what she wants, but doesn't realize she's doing it. That's kind of cool.
And I think her great, the moment to me was where she's attacked in the park and she's saved by Diana, by a drunk guy who's trying to molest her. Yeah. And she ultimately gets saved by Diana coming in. And the same guy's there again, and it's that moment where she realizes the power that she has and comes back and attacks him. And one of the homeless people that she walks past every day on the way into work is there.
She used to feed every day.
Yeah, and feeds. Yeah. And is asking, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Just leave me alone, it's none of your business." It's a really good moment. I think Kristen Wiig is fantastic, where you just see, ultimately, I think she's confident, but the thing she is losing is her kindness. That is the price she is paying for, this, confidence, power, and abilities like Diana.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely her humanity really is the central kind of part. That's why she becomes animalistic as she goes before to become Cheetah. She's losing her humanity kind of thing. She's obviously one of the main antagonists in the movie. Max Lord, we mentioned a little bit about Max Lord in the movie. Interestingly, I was quite intrigued that he was kind of left out of a lot of the trailers and the build up to the movie. We didn't see a huge amount of Pedro Pascal in the run up to the movie. We knew he was in the movie. Max Lord is a character from the comic books, was an antagonist of was a villain for the Justice League going all the way back to the 80s. So we knew he's in there. We knew he's a bad guy. Didn't really know much about him. And I can kind of understand now after seeing the movie, because there is the big twist there for the character. Firstly is that he's seen as this kind of, massively successful businessman on TV. We saw that a little bit glimpse of that in the trailer, and then you see him go back to his office. His office is empty, dusty. Doesn't have a penny to his name. He's been conning his investors to try and just keep the business going. And he's looking for this artifact, this thing that can wish all his bad away and make him finally successful, make him able to prove himself to the world. Something that he's been trying to do since he's a kid. I really like this storyline with Max, but I can understand why you couldn't show much of that in the trailer. There's nothing really that you could edit into a minute of a trailer clip to show this guy is the major antagonist in the movie. Whereas with Kristen Wiig, you can show the transformation a little bit. You can show that she's Cheetah from the comic books, but he doesn't become anything other than himself embodied with this artifact, effectively.
Yeah, so I thought Pedro Pascal was really, really good. Same with Kristen Wiig. As you said before, Kristen Wiig, the big surprise, and actually the nice thing about her role in this movie is that Cheetah only comes in right at the end, and I think it really works. And I think with Pedro Pascal, it's that there's so many little shifts here. Like you say, he comes across just as the successful businessman, making money in the time of spend, stock markets, and all that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden,
you can get your 19-inch TV over by the end of today.
Then all of a sudden, you realize that he's a con man.
Yeah.
And he's been conning the public and his investors. Mm-hmm. But I really, really enjoyed his arc. I thought it was so good. And particularly around the ending. That's what was so good for me about this kind of final third act of the movie. Because I just actually didn't expect it. I mean, effectively, most superhero movies, the bad guy gets put in jail, he is killed, or he's destroyed, however that may be.
Beaten up, loses his mind, particularly when you've got a powerful superhero who punches things.
Yeah,
but you'd expect him to be punched in the face.
Exactly. Yeah. But here, he actually is redeemed. He gets a redemption in a sense because of his son, and what happens because I think the way it's portrayed is that this artifact by this mischievous god, he can't control. And it's about him realizing that the way to greatness isn't just by accumulating, but it's actually about his relationship with his son.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really brave of this movie, actually, to not have the police surround Max Lord and put him in jail. Effectively, Max Lord goes off, not into the sunset as such, but, metaphorically into the sunset with his son.
Yeah.
After making the connection and realizing that he's going to do these things for his son. Yeah. And I thought that was really, really good, that he had the moment too, that Wonder Woman was also trying to broadcast to everyone else who had made the wish that they needed to renounce their wishes in order to put this genie back into the lamp, effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love the economy of storytelling, that section for Max Lord right at the end of the movie where he's going through his life, effectively, how he got to this point in his life. And it's all about his father and how badly he was treated by his father. His father was beating his mother. He was attacking him, abusing him for wetting the bed at one point. We see that he tries to set up his own business and it doesn't work for him, but he keeps trying. And as I say, this kind of 80s ideal of if you dream it, it will come. You won't have to put in the work kind of thing. You hear it in the way that he speaks on TV when he's trying to sell the shares in his company. It's why not just sit back and let somebody else do the work? Give me your money and you'll get, you'll invest in us and you'll get money back from us. You don't have to do anything at all. And that's kind of how he's lived his life almost. He wants to be there. He wants to achieve greatness, but he has no plan to get there. He has no way of getting there. And what he realizes at the end is what's more important is actually passing on his love to his son, who loves him completely. Like you see over and over again, all his son wants is his time with his father. That was his wish. He asks his son what his wish is, and he just says, I just wish to spend time with you. He has any choice of any wish in the world, and that's what his son wishes for. It's a really sentimental moment. You mentioned earlier on the movie's being released at Christmas this year. I think the movie had 6 release dates. The original release date was supposed to be the 13th of December, 2019. So just 1 year on is when we're getting it now. But it's had 3 or 4 release dates, trying to take that summer blockbuster spot, that kind of thing. But I think it works so well.
I do.
Especially this year. There's that thing in these types of movies, you will go and see a big summer blockbuster in the cinema, obviously. But if it becomes a favorite of your family, this is the time of year that everybody sits around and watches these types of films, sits down and watches the big blockbusters. It's Christmas from then onwards. That the holiday season is when you sit down and watch your movies with your family. I think this is going to sit in a lot of families' rotation on the Christmas rack every year from now on. I feel like it's just got that kind of a bit of power in it. It's got a bit of inspiration in it. And it's got that nice sentimental moment at the end where everybody kind of has to give up their wishes. The one thing they dreamed of, one thing they wanted to achieve, and they got instantly. And I love that also is played out by Diana in the moment where she has to say to herself, I have to say goodbye to Steve here. And I love how it's filmed. You see him realizing it at the same moment, her walking away. And Steve says from behind a post, not even on screen, he says, I love you. And that's the last moment they spend together. Yeah. I think it's a beautifully shot moment.
It is really good. We should add that not all of the wishes are, say, great or about personal sort of wealth or getting stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a really dodgy moment where there's 2 people in a cafe, the lady behind the counter and the customer, who are having this argument, and it all gets sort of very deep very quickly because she's English, he's Irish, and she goes, yeah, we should all be rounded up and sent home. And he turns around and goes, I wish you were dead. Yep. And she dies right there. And so
and outside the window, you see the paddy wagons.
It was a little weird.
Yeah, as all of the Irish people are rounded up and sent off back to Ireland. Being an Irish guy, watching the Irish premiere, and John obviously also being Irish, but from England, watching that moment on screen, it's like, whoa, okay, that's gone a bit too far with your wishes there.
It was kind of like, I think it was maybe just like check the context of that. It just seemed really weird and escalated very quickly. I thought.
You know, in fairness, there is a much bigger moment that's in here that we haven't even talked about, which is the moment when Israel is effectively cut off from the other nations and all of the Palestinians are thrown out of Israel because of a wish that an oil baron makes with Max Lord. Like that's a massive moment in itself, you know, and especially, you know, given that Gal Gadot is from Israel herself, you know, I'm sure there was some input there on the sensitivity of that subject. But I suppose what the movie's trying to get across is if you can wish for absolutely anything, there are people in this world that will wish for things without thinking of anybody else at all. You know?
And it's also, it comes to the genie moment. Be careful what you wish for, because it may get granted.
Yeah. And if everybody else has a wish as well, remember, how does this pan out? How does it pan out if one person wishes for, you know, all Irish people
wishes? Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. How does it balance itself off?
But that's why the whole world goes to crap by the end of the film, is because everybody's having these competing wishes, not thinking about the impact on other people. So the whole world is collapsing because everybody's wishing for just themselves, until that beautiful moment of Diana kind of telling everybody, we can achieve this a different way if we work together almost, you know, we can achieve greatness together.
It really was a bit of a weird moment, that, but certainly, it's just saying all these different wishes going off, and it's turning everything to chaos and dung, effectively. And you see the world collapsing around, you see, Max Lord going ever further, you know, he goes to the oil baron because that helps his business, to the president in order to sort of get the power there, and ultimately to going to the satellites because of the frequency of the satellite waves from the waves, the communication waves, that he can literally touch everyone through these waves, and to become godlike.
And the price that he's paying is his health. He's getting sicker and sicker and sicker. The more of these wishes he grants, the more of these things that the pieces, the power, the wealth that he's taking from other people, he's losing his health. Yeah. And then he's trying to effectively take health from everybody around the world as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Is there anything about the storyline itself that you didn't like? You know, there's loads of really good things in the film, and overall I did like it, but there's a few things that probably kind of stand out about this central storyline. What do you think of this idea of the main character being able to grant wishes for anybody?
Yeah, I really liked that. I liked that he became that vessel. I thought it was kind of intriguing that, you know, he had to get them to say, I wish I had. So, you know, grab their hands. But the way it was done, it felt like, you know, a really excited businessman would do that. It's like, I want you to invest in me, you know? Yeah. And he got the wishes that way. I think the thing that wasn't clear was that there was a price to be paid at the start.
Yeah.
About midway through, it's just after Max Lord has taken the army of this oil baron in Egypt, where he had sold off his oil, so Max couldn't actually get what he wanted, and you have this chase through the desert, and you see Diana getting grazed by a bullet and it bleeding, and you don't quite understand that it's because she's losing her powers. It's more that, the bullet scraped her.
Yeah, exactly.
Because she's still taking bullets out of the air with her lasso of truth.
So cool.
She's keeping tanks and armored vehicles apart with her legs. So there's no sense that she's getting weaker here. And then all of a sudden, in the White House, you have the fight between her and Barbara Minerva. Yeah. And she is losing badly to Barbara. You know, Barbara is an equal to her in the fighting stakes there. And it's then, I would say, right on the cusp of Act 3 that you have the definitive realization from Diana that by making that throwaway wish right at the start that she wanted Steve back and him coming back, that she's paid a price. Yeah. I kind of feel that needed to be known a bit, because She didn't know that. We knew that from Max Lord explaining that every time a wish is granted, the person who's asked that wish loses something. So we see that with the Egyptian oil baron, but Diana doesn't know that.
Yeah.
And I think that felt like sort of out of the blue. And even before that whole thing with the Egyptian oil baron, which again, it is in the middle of the film, it's a good way in. That's still not known. You just assume that, say, Barbara Minerva is getting more powerful and there's no cost to it. That there's no cost to her humanity going, or that Steve just came back and there's no cost to Diana.
Yeah.
And I thought that needed to be made just kind of pulled out a bit more. Like, I think just for me in general, I do think the middle of this film dips.
Yeah.
I think the ending is great and it absolutely fired me up. But I do feel that the middle kind of just meandered a bit too much. They spent too much time dealing with these Max Lord getting the wishes and so on. And even just going to Egypt. I think, why not go to Dallas? It's perfect for the 80s setting. Oil barons in Dallas. And the Max goes there, and I think investigating the artifact more would have been really, really good, because it would have explained why Barbara Minerva, is becoming more and more suspicious. Because it is simply it's suddenly Barbara turns on Diana to protect herself and her powers.
Exactly, yeah.
And she has to protect Max Lord. And I think having a better build up to that would have been better.
Like, wouldn't it have been nice if perhaps this was a little bit Indiana Jonesy, that they traced the origins of the artifact and
given they're archaeologists, exactly,
and went on a bit of a tomb raiding expedition. I kind of get the feeling, and I don't know why this kind of popped into my head when I was watching the movie. I kind of get the feeling that there was an initial idea that when Max Lord takes on board the artifact, that he turns into that god of mischief that they mention. It's not Loki, John, because Loki's in the Marvel universe. It's not Loki. It's a god of mischief. Okay.
Well, I think Loki is registered trademark.
He's Norse, of course, but they're not going to say it in a DC movie that it's Loki, because everybody will just go, they're stealing it from Marvel, even though they're not. He's a Norse god. But I got the feeling that they were going to play this out where Max Lord takes this on board and he gets more grotesque almost, or gets bigger and becomes more godlike. Very like Ares in the first movie, and because of the feedback on the first movie, they kind of went, okay, let's avoid that in the second movie. Let's avoid it being a big CGI fest where both of our antagonists turn into these CGI creatures. Let's just have Max Lord be Max Lord. His getting more disheveled as the movie goes on. His suit's getting more crumpled as he's getting more wealthy and more powerful. Maybe that's kind of the arc that they're going. And I wonder if by kind of taking out that element of it, did they change the story too much away from what their original intention was, and then kind of leave some other elements in? Because every script goes through multiple drafts with loads of different ways of going. So I remember what you said to me after the movie when we watched it. You were saying that it got to the halfway point of the movie, and you were going, it slowed down a bit, and then you couldn't see where they were going to be going to at the end. But they nailed the end, so it was fine. But halfway through the movie in the cinema, you were saying that it kind of felt
it was dragging.
This isn't grabbing me, and then it did.
Yeah, it like the opening really grabs you. The initial thing with Diana and Barbara, that whole Act 1 thing, setting it up is really well done, and then it just kind of keeps going, kind of not really anywhere, and you don't see where the ending's coming, to be honest. As I say, I think the whole trip to Egypt, I don't think that needed to happen. I think it could have been done better, keeping it in the US, in Dallas, and allowing then Barbara to stay on board, not have that weird jet fighter sequence, which I thought it was nice with all the 4th of July fireworks. I got the nostalgia, but I just didn't work for me.
Okay.
And I think they could have had that, that battle scene on the road in the middle of, one of the straight highways in the US with a private security firm.
Right.
And it would have allowed them to be in America figuring out what this artifact is, where it's come from, what it does, to both build more information for the audience on the artifact, what Max Lord was doing with it, and why Barbara Minerva is suddenly starting to, maybe drift away from wanting to be Diana's best pal, that they kind of work together. Because in the end, they did that through a scene of going to a shaman that they happened to find.
Yeah.
And it seemed really off the cuff. And then it all built from that. So I think that was my kind of issue with it.
I gotcha. There's so much to talk about the movie. I'm going to talk about the that plane sequence because I think there is some really good things that come out of it. I know the scene itself may not have worked for you, but there are some really good scenes to come out of it. Importantly, Steve Trevor is a pilot. That's his main function. That's what he was in the war. He was a spy for the British Army in World War One.
Yes, kind of seconded from the American Air Force.
Yeah, but he's a pilot, so it's really important that he sits in a plane. It's also really important for fans of Wonder Woman that there is at least a moment with the invisible jet. We have this moment where Diana kind of wants to channel what her father had been doing, her father Zeus. As we learned in the first movie, he's the one that protected Themyscira from the eyes of the world. He was able to throw over this invisibility blanket almost over this whole island of Themyscira, and she wants to do that with the plane, so that they aren't tracked by radar, or aren't tracked by eyes, I think, anyway, because radar, I think, would still be able to track a plane even if it's invisible, wouldn't it? Probably. But I love the kind of interplay between the two of them. It's a little moment for the two of them together when they're going off on their adventure. I loved Steve asking her, have you done this before? And she goes, I did it with a coffee cup. And he's looking at her kind of going, but this is a massive plane, and did it work for you? And she goes, I don't know, I've never found the cup again, which I think is a good little gag. Yeah. But it is, she is quite synonymous with this invisible plane, because Chris mentioned in the last podcast that in the comics she became able to fly more recently. That's something in the newer versions of the comic, but regularly in the comics when she couldn't fly, she used the invisible jet. It's you buy that off the racks. That's the toy that would come along with Wonder Woman, is her invisible jet. So that is something that she's known for. So a nice way to put it into the movie. But more importantly, this is where she learns how to fly. Steve tells her the tricks of how to fly. That's how she's able to use her abilities later on in the movie, using her lasso of truth, riding the air, which I think is a really wonderful scene that they show Diana learning how to fly, jumping in the air and flying through the air. Yeah. That kind of sequence, it's very reminiscent of Christopher Reeve's and Richard Donner's Superman from the 70s.
Definitely. It was great.
That kind of moment where you have someone that is learning how to fly, that kind of, but she's leaning on this information or this help that she's gotten from Steve Trevor in order to learn a new ability.
Yeah, it is a great moment where she is learning to fly. She's using a lasso of truth to kind of Tarzan swing off bolts of lightning. Oh, yes. So really awesome. Fantastic. And I like that throwback to Steve Trevor saying, use the wind, feel the currents, use them to move through the air, glide through the air. I thought that was really, really good. And I think the invisible jet is great. Absolutely great. Yeah. I think for me, it's because the whole start of that scene started with a guy getting into a fighter jet or a bomber jet that possibly shouldn't have been in the Smithsonian Museum at the time anyway, because it was a tornado. Right. So actually that was currently modern technology, modern plane. Yeah. But someone, and maybe this is because of the fact that Steve Trevor is actually inhabiting someone else. He is older.
Well, that's true.
And for artistic reasons, it is Chris Pine who's there.
Yeah.
So maybe the other guy is a pilot and knows how to fly jet pilots, but all I could see was a guy who last time he was flying was in a biplane in World War One, and all of a sudden can now fly a modern, sophisticated fly-by-wire, computer-driven, much faster jet fighter.
I hope they've done their research. There's enough people to ask the question as to whether somebody who's flown a plane in the 1910s or the 19-teens, is that how you say it? Whether they can fly a plane created 60 or 70 years later. I presume they've done it. I wouldn't know.
I don't know.
I presume they've done a little bit of research on that.
It just meant I didn't buy into it.
Right. But I do, as I say, I love that it leads to Diana learning how to fly herself. You almost get the feeling, because of how earnest the movie is and how in touch with its own sense of self the movie is, that I now got the feeling coming out that every time Diana jumps in the air and flies, she is instantly reminded of Steve Trevor forever from now on.
Which is the great thing.
He's with her forever, and I think that's a lovely thing. It's
a memory of him.
Yeah, that will stick with her every time.
Him close in her mind, but she doesn't need him physically. Exactly.
There you go. What else do we want to talk about, John?
I think just on Steve Trevor, I think it was great having Chris Pine, and I did like that choice of, even though you looked in the mirror, it was someone completely different.
Yeah.
I liked the choice to have Chris Pine there. I liked some of the gags in I'm thinking the bin was a piece of modern art, when he was being shown around.
The garbage can.
I liked, the crazy 80s fashion and him trying to wear that. I thought it was all really good, but I do think he was underutilized a bit in it. And I don't know, it didn't feel the same, and maybe it's supposed to be the reason for it, because technically he shouldn't be there. He's dead. He should be a man that is awkward to the audience as much as to Diana, because he's been brought back from the dead. I mean, effectively, it's sweet zombie Steve Trevor. So, that might be why, but
I know what you mean. I do love Chris Pine, though. Whenever he's on screen, he always lights it up. He's always got his gags are really good. They'll always land really well in the movie. But I didn't really need him around for any longer in the movie. And I think, when I think back to the first trailer that we saw for this, saying that Chris Pine was coming back, all I was going was, but it's set in 1984. How the hell does that happen? So to have him in there and to be, created from a wish for Diana, it's important for her character to learn that she can't just wish something into existence to make a perfect life. That's the, again, major point of the movie, but that's all he's there for. And I'm kind of glad that it was just that 30 or 40 minutes of the movie. And they did have some good scenes together. She had closure on their relationship, but that's kind of all I needed with him. The movie's about Diana, and we know that 10, 15 years later, she has nobody else around her. She's not surrounded by anybody else. So it's good to have him in there, and absolutely, I'll watch Chris Pine in anything really, but I didn't need him in the entirety of the movie. I didn't need to be co-star this time like he was in some sense in the first movie.
I think, like you said, it's almost a role reversal in that he is treated as a plot point, like a lot of women were in 1980s movies. And nothing, and that's the thing, it's just nothing much. Like, I loved the desert chase, with him and Gal Gadot. I loved that he does become these words that help her fly, and that's her memory of him. But I think ultimately it was a plot device. I like the choice of using him, but technically it was someone else. Just his spirit, his soul imbued within someone else. And that's to say, maybe that's why he could fly the jet. But look, I just felt I really, really loved Chris Pine in the first movie. And I think seeing him back, I like the choice as to how he is back effectively. He kind of isn't really. It's just it's a stylistic choice that Diana views Steve Trevor as the Steve Trevor she remembers.
Yes. And that was one question, and maybe I'm being really stupid. We only got to see the movie once. But we obviously see Chris Pine from, maybe the second minute that the character's back on screen, right? They have a conversation. She realizes it's Steve. Then suddenly you see Chris Pine for all the rest of the movie until he disappears, says, "I love you." And that's the last time you see Chris Pine on screen. That scene at the end of the movie where she meets the guy in the park and he says hello to her and says she looks great and she compliments his look and then he walks away. Is that the person?
Is the same guy.
That is the body that he inhabited.
I think so, yeah.
I was just kind of going, everybody in the 80s had long coats and long black hair and, looked like they were on the set of Wall Street. So I was kind of going, is it definitely the same guy? And I think it's partly because you don't see, I think maybe you only see it once more in the film. Steve Trevor looks in the mirror and you see that actor.
It's really early on, actually.
Yeah. So I was kind of like, it's been an hour and a half here and I'm looking at the guy going, is that the same person? Has she seen him across the room or across the park and gone, that's the body that Steve Trevor was occupying while he was here, I just didn't tell, unfortunately. I'm sure it was. You all know that I just got that wrong. One other thing that I want to talk about, in the movie, because I thought it was so impressive. Once again, the opening, that competition in Themyscira, I think was such a great way to open up the movie. Wow. Like, how exciting and how fun to be back on the island of Themyscira. We mentioned in our last podcast, we couldn't work out how Diana would go back to Themyscira because she left the island. We thought she never went back to the island, and we had posited the idea that it was probably going to be a memory of hers to bring all the other characters in, and she's able to look back on her time there to learn something for the future, which is exactly what this flashback scene at the beginning was. But it was really exciting to see all of the the Amazons battling it out amongst each other. Really good fun.
It was great to be back on Themyscira. I loved the young Diana as well. It was great seeing Hippolyta there as well, and Antiope. And it's Antiope who gives, greatness is not what you think. That is kind of the overarching aspect to this story. I love that because, of her death previously, in the first film, and just how important her auntie was to Diana. So, that was really good. And the competition is superb. I did like the fact, I really wasn't expecting, actually. I just because Antiope does say, keep your head down, run, pace yourself. But I thought it was almost like a little, pep talk, which was, but you're going to lose this because you're up against, 5, stronger women. So I was really surprised that young Diana, technically won, although she was then stripped of it because she didn't go all the way by horse.
No, she cheated. She took the short path, John. Everybody's supposed to take the full path. She lost her horse because she was looking behind her when she hit a tree and got knocked off the horse, but she took a path that nobody else in the course would have taken. It's the shortcut. So again, a great moment with Antiope, with Robin Wright just grabbing her, throwing her to the floor and telling her, not your time. You can do it again some other time in the future, kind of thing. So I really like that, and it's
tell you what though, I wouldn't like to run through that Krypton Factor course, to be honest.
No, absolutely
I would be dead probably on the poles bit right at the start.
Once it starts spinning and going end over end, I think I might throw up and have to leave it to everybody else to finish. Anything else in the movie that we haven't talked about, John?
I think just the big battle with Cheetah, actually, at this satellite communication station. And I think the whole fight felt really energetic. I loved the suit of armor that Wonder Woman has on with the wings was just really superb, and it comes from the Amazonian, I was going to say super soldier, but again, that's another person. But the kind of protector and warrior of Themyscira, and that the competition that you see there is to become that next warrior in her memory.
Absolutely. Remember, greatest warrior of Themyscira. Really important, because I think we learned something about her in the movie, and I'm not 100% sure I picked this up right, but the suit of armor effectively is what Diana's wearing. It allows her to fly in, using the wings, and then she protects herself with this suit of armor, when she's being battered around.
That was awesome.
By Cheetah. That, like, it looked really, really good, but you see that Cheetah's able to rip pieces of that armor off.
Yeah.
Okay. We hear as well that Diana, when she came out into the world, wanted to go and find the greatest hero of Themyscira, but she couldn't find her anywhere in the world. And I wonder if part of that, the greatest warrior of Themyscira, who's remembered every time they have these games, I wonder if part of that is she did die while protecting Themyscira, because this protection isn't impervious. This protection eventually gets broken away. She's broken down and she loses her life. So again, greatness is not exactly what you believe it is.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the fight was really good. As I say, I think Cheetah is a little CGI here, but the fight's good, and I like the matchup between these two. It's really good. I think the important thing after this is, we do see Cheetah looking out kind of forlornly, a bit like a cat would, over the setting sun after Max Lord has been defeated. She's kind of sat up against the rocks just by this research station, kind of looking out, and you don't really know whether did she reject her wish or not. I suspect not.
Is she still alive, or
she's still alive? Yeah. Even though she was electrocuted and so on, I thought this was the death of her, but I suppose she's become so powerful and she's been able to survive that. But I thought there was some nice moves in that fight, and the same in the White House as well, where it's still Barbara Minerva, and I like that, where she's just getting a little bit more leopard print into her fashion.
Absolutely.
The
high 80s fashion.
The high 80s, and the boots are getting higher and higher up the leg. But these two battles between Diana and Barbara Minerva were really, really good.
They were,
I think it was really good to see, to be honest.
I kind of like it, as you say, as Diana's power is kind of waning, Barbara's powers are rising in that point in the White House where they're both of equal power level, basically. So it works really well.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, and I don't know whether it was the same in the previous Wonder Woman movie, but I loved her use of the lasso of truth here, like picking the bullet out of the air to save Steve, using it, spinning it around as like almost a bulletproof shield, deflecting the bullets, using it for swinging between the lightning bolts and all that. It felt so well utilized in the fights as well as for other purposes. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's it. That's all the things I wanted to talk about on Wonder Woman. Really enjoyable movie overall. I'm so excited to hear what other people have to say. We're recording this on the 17th of December. The movie's only been open for one night, so I haven't heard from any of my friends or from any of our wonderful listeners as to what you thought of the movie, but I hope you enjoyed it. Please let us know. You can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or pop over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. I'd love to hear what you thought of the movie, because I really enjoyed it, and I felt like the kind of movie after the year we've had, a really inspirational movie as to how we move forward as a society. I felt like the exact right movie to be watching in December 2020. John, what did you think of Wonder Woman 1984 overall?
I really, really enjoyed this movie. It is a 80s extravaganza for sure. I would give this 4 bushy perms out of 5. Big bushy perms indeed out of 5. I think it is. It's a real feel-good movie. Yep. And to be honest, that final act for me, it just got the hairs raised up. I loved it. I loved the of the perm. But I just loved it. The music came bounding in with that great signature tune. Diana was Diana. She was doing the best. She'd seen the light. There was a great fight in the White House, at the satellite base. There was this really surprising end to Maxwell Lord that I just wasn't expecting. And it all worked for me, that final bit. So great performance by Gal Gadot, Kirsten Wiig, and Pedro Pascal in this. The opening is great, going back to Themyscira, Hippolyta, Antiope, the protector of Themyscira, the artifact.
Yeah.
But I have to say, there was a lull in the middle. It does kind of, you wonder, in effect, how long is left in the movie. It just went on a bit too long for me.
Right.
I think with Steve Trevor, again, it was great having him back in here, and I like the way they did it. But ultimately, it feels as though the middle part of this movie could have been better for me. And
it's a 2.5 hour movie, so maybe that's the area you wanted to be cut back to.
Just cut back, I think.
Shorter.
Because I was there going, when are we getting the big Wonder Woman moment? And that's why when it came at the end, I was like, this is awesome. And it was. And I think ultimately, if I watched it again, it is because I of that feel good. And I think the characterization of Diana is great.
Yep.
I loved the antagonists in this, in Max Lord and Barbara Minerva. So it is definitely worth a watch. And yeah, it's 4 big bushy perm do's out of 5 from me.
I was sure you were going to go for big shoulder pads out of 5 this time around, but yeah.
Well, you can chuck in a few shoulder pads as well.
Perm D's works. We hope you enjoyed the movie as much as we did. I know, hopefully you've watched it if you've listened all the way through our podcast about it. I'm sure you have. So you don't need any recommendations from us, but I'm definitely going to be watching this one again.
Definitely. It will keep you warm and snuggly like any good 80s leg warmers would.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. We will be going back to the cinema next year in 2021. Hopefully many, many times.
Yeah, touch wood.
Yeah, there's lots and lots of movies coming out next year. I think we've got, on the Marvel side, we've got Black Widow, Eternals, Shang-Chi, and the 12 Rings by the same writer as Wonder Woman, as I mentioned earlier on. On the DC side, we have the ultimate Snyder cut of Justice League coming out next year, fixing all the issues that people had apparently with that movie. 5 or 6 hours long, and all going to HBO Max as a mini series.
I'd forgotten it was that long. That is ridiculous.
Well, again, these are all things that we're not sure about. These are all some of the bits that we're not sure about. But there is going to be an ultimate cut. It will all be available on HBO.
Well,
apparently, going to be over 2 or 3 nights, and potentially could be in the cinema as well.
Well, quite frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
I'm really looking forward to it. I want to see what Scott Snyder has in store.
For 5 hours, and that will be on HBO Max as well.
Yeah, the full version of it. And hopefully sometime in the future in Europe we'll be getting HBO Max, because they made a massive announcement that basically every Warner Brothers movie for next year is going to be going to HBO Max day of release. Day and date as the cinema. That's not gone down too well with cinema owners.
No, and it actually means pretty much the rest of the world, it is still through theatrical releases in cinemas.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because HBO Max is still geographically constrained in North America.
Yes, but I did see that there's a very high potential that a version of HBO Max will be coming out over here next year. I think it's September 2021 is the idea, but that does mean we miss a couple of months of next year of these movie releases.
Maybe they can call it HBO to the Max.
Maybe, but if things continue the way they are and people keep going in and out of lockdowns, I do feel particularly sorry for people in the UK who were so excited about this movie. We're getting it 9 days before the US. People so excited about it, bought their tickets, and then went into lockdown the night before and can't go out and see it and don't have any other option at all. Whatever about supporting cinemas and going to cinemas and buying tickets to go to it, at least in the US, there is that option of watching it at home if you don't feel safe. If you're in an area where COVID cases are going up and you can't get out to a cinema, at least you have the option of a service at home where you can even buy it from, Well, there are rumours that it'll come out over here on Sky towards the end of January, so a month and a half late, that you'll be able to buy the premium version over 20, 30 quid that you'll be able to buy it. But I kind of feel at this time, the idea of being able to make your choice, or if you're
it's really
being
important.
restricted and you can't go out, it's just really important to a lot of people.
And because of the absolute increase in the number of streaming services in the past, where I presume they could have just done a short deal with Netflix and had it on there. Now they want it for their own service. And I get that. But yeah, it's a shame that during a pandemic, there isn't the ability to have the choice so that it can fit with either the way the virus is going at the moment in that particular country, or it's because you want to have that option of staying in rather than going out, you know?
I would have paid 20 quid to watch this at home if it had been available on the same day. Over here, definitely would have paid the money. No two ways about it. Thanks so much once again for joining us. Remember, you can also join us for Pennyworth Season 2. We're on episode 3 coming up next week. Join us for that on TV Podcast Industry. Search for that on any villainous or heroic podcast catcher, and you'll get our podcast all about Pennyworth.
Yes, you can come on over and subscribe at tvpodcastindustries.com. You can support us on patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries as well. Remember, rate us, leave a review, because sharing the podcast is sharing the love. Any way you see fit, whether it's subscribing to your podcast catcher of choice or through Patreon, please come on over and subscribe. We'd love to have you, because we will also be returning to Marvel as well with the Disney Plus shows of WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier on March 19th. And of course, Loki will be raising his head above the parapet again, maybe in artifact form.
Maybe he will have an artifact that grants wishes and takes a toe.
In May. We'll be getting back into Marvel, I suppose, after a bit of a hiatus since the Marvel Netflix stuff and the Defenders, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and so on
Iron Fist,
cancelled.
There's only two more.
Punisher as well. Otherwise, we are DC Universing it with Pennyworth Season 2 at the moment. So please head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you find your own greatness at not much cost.
Absolutely. Fellow moviegoers, thank you so much for joining us. It is, as always, a pleasure discussing movies with you. But remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep those leg warmers moving.
Absolutely, and stay safe. Have a very happy holiday and Happy New Year. We'll see you really soon.
Yeah, shoulder pads are a good way of staying safe. They really do pad out that fall.
Only if you put over your face as a mask, perhaps.
Oh, that's true.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.